Hello and welcome to another video. This time we'll be looking at sprites. We're going to start with the elements that we used within the bitmap program we looked at a few lessons ago. This time we've got a single sprite on the screen made up of the crystal that we imported previously as a bitmap. Sprites always float in front of other bitmaps that we have on the screen. I've also drawn a purple background so you can see that the bitmap sits in front of it. And in this case it's got an alpha channel so you can see through to the purple background behind. Sprites can also contain multiple frames. This means that you can quickly change what the sprite looks like. It might be that you have an animated character, for instance, or maybe you want it to change depending on what direction it might be moving around the screen. I've defined the buttons 1 and 2 here to swap between different frames. I've also set up the buttons H and S so that we can hide and show a sprite very quickly. If we take a look at the code, you'll see that the start is as usual, and we're going to send a chunk of data to the VDU to set everything up. Let's take a look at that to start with. As before, we loaded a crystal and a star as bitmaps and gave them a defined value, crystal being 0 and star with 1. This time we're also going to add our sprite and call this 0. Sprite IDs and bitmap IDs can coexist. They can be the same numbers. They do not refer to each other. So as before, we've loaded and defined both of those bitmaps. But here comes the interesting part, actually setting up the sprite. And these are the commands that you'll need. This one here selects sprite 0. Our sprite was 0. Just in case it's been used previously, we clear all the frames in that sprite. We then add crystal to the first frame. We're then going to add a second bitmap, the star, to the second frame. Note that frame numbers always start from 0, and sprite numbers start from 0. However, we need to activate sprites, and this starts from 1. We need to activate the number of sprites that we have defined. We can then show the current sprite. By default, it will be at position 0, 0, but we can move it to wherever we like. To move a sprite, you select the sprite first, you move it with the move command, and give it an X and Y coordinate. Note that these are in words, not bytes. You should then update the sprites in the GPU. In order to show that our sprites are sitting in front of a bitmap background, I then plotted a rectangle on the screen, and this is exactly the same plot routine that we used in the previous lesson. So how do we change those frames in the code? Well, we've looked at seeing what keys are pressed in the past, and here we're doing exactly the same thing. We're looking to see if particular keys are pressed and then acting on that. So whether the number 1 key, the number 2, the H or the S are pressed. And in that loop we just keep checking and going all the way around. And if the escape key is pressed, well then we exit. So if we want to change the frame, again we're going to send some VDP commands off. This uses the standard routine for sending them. We set HL for the start, BC for the length, and then send select sprite, and then select the frame of that sprite that we want. So in this case, we're setting it to frame 0. Setting it to frame 1 is exactly the same, except we've changed the number 1. The hide and show sprite routines are pretty similar. We select the sprite we want to hide, and then we use this command 23, 27, 12 to hide the sprite, or alternatively 23, 27, 11 to show the current sprite. Hopefully you'll be able to use these in your own code. We've learned how to set up and define a sprite with multiple frames. We've learned how to change those frames and how to hide and show it. We've also looked at how to change its position.